Okay, so you want to be a truck driver. The open road. No boss standing over your shoulder. No degree, no debt, no cubicle. Just you, 80,000 pounds of steel, and a horizon that keeps moving. You've seen the billboards on the interstate, 60 cents a mile, $90,000 your first year, sign-on bonus, paid in 90 days. That's the picture. That's what the recruiting ads are built to make you feel. Here's what the recruiter doesn't tell you. That you can work a 70-hour week and get paid for 40 of them. That the 4 hours you spent sitting at a warehouse dock in Ohio last Tuesday earned you exactly $0. That the truck you were promised you'd own one day is a lease designed so that you almost certainly never will. And that in 1980, the average American trucker earned the equivalent of about $146,000 in today's money, while the median driver today earns around $57,000. Same roads, same freight, better trucks, 60% less money. Trucking is one of the most misunderstood jobs in America. From the outside, it looks like freedom. From the inside, it's a business where you're only paid when the wheels are turning, and where almost everything that stops those wheels is somebody else's fault and your financial problem. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly which version of this job you're likely to get, and why the difference is worth about $60,000 a year. Let's start with how you actually get paid, because this is the mechanism everything else in this video hangs on. You are almost certainly not going to be paid by the hour. Long-haul drivers are paid by the mile, cents per mile, or CPM. In 2026, if you're brand new, you're looking at somewhere around 45 to 52 cents a mile. 2 to 5 years in, roughly 52 to 65. Senior drivers with clean records can reach 65 to 80 cents, and specialized freight, hazmat, oversized, tanker, pays more. Let's do the math on what that actually means. Say you're running 2,500 miles a week at 60 cents. That's $1,500 a week. Call it $78,000 a year. For a job that took you 3 weeks of training to qualify for, that's a genuinely good number. Now here's the trapdoor. You only get paid when the wheels are turning. You do not get paid sitting at the dock waiting for a forklift. You do not get paid in the traffic jam outside Atlanta. You do not get paid during your DOT inspection, or while the shipper hunts for the paperwork, or while a mechanic figures out what's wrong with your airline, or while you're strapping down a flatbed load in the rain, or while you sit out a snowstorm in Wyoming. Understand what that means. You can be on duty, awake, working, legally responsible for a vehicle the weight of a house, not free to go anywhere, and be earning nothing at all, for hours. Detention time at docks is routinely unpaid unless your specific carrier has a detention policy, and even the carriers that do pay it usually don't start the clock until you've already been sitting there 2 hours for free. So that 60 cents a mile isn't a wage. It's a wage only if everything goes right. Take your $78,000 year and add 10 unpaid hours a week of docks and delays, which is a completely ordinary week, and you haven't lost any pay on paper. Your CPM is identical, but you've just worked 500 extra hours a year for free, divide it out, and the high-paying job you signed up for can quietly fall toward, and in bad cases below, minimum wage per hour of your actual life. That's the whole design. Every delay in the supply chain, the slow warehouse, the bad weather, the broken part, the traffic, is absorbed by you. Not by the carrier, not by the shipper who kept you waiting. You. Now, what does it cost to get in? And here's where trucking is completely different from every other career we've broken down on this channel. A doctor spends over $200,000 in a decade. A pilot spends $100,000 before anyone lets them near a paying passenger. You? A few $1,000s and a few weeks at a CDL school. Better yet, most large carriers will train you for free. They'll pay for your school, put you up, get you licensed. All you have to do is sign a contract agreeing to drive for them for a set period afterward. And if you leave early, you owe them the full cost of that training. Most people hear low cost to enter and think opportunity. In labor economics, it means something very specific. Roughly 400,000 new commercial driver's licenses get issued in this country every year. Think about what that does to your negotiating position. If it takes 3 weeks and a few $1,000s to replace you, you have almost no leverage, and the pay structure is going to reflect that permanently. Which brings us to the thing the industry says about itself constantly, and the number that complicates it. You have definitely heard that America has a truck driver shortage. Industry groups have been saying it for decades. Now hold that next to this. Annual driver turnover at large truckload carriers routinely runs above 90%. At fleets doing more than $30 million a year, turnover hit 92% at the end of 2020. 9 out of 10 drivers gone from that company inside a year. Critics make a simple argument. That is not what a shortage looks like. In an actual shortage, wages rise until it resolves. That's what a market does. And if 400,000 new licenses are being handed out every year into an industry that says it can't find drivers, where exactly is everybody going? But here's the number that should really get your attention, and it's a comparison. In the same period, those long-haul truckload carriers were running 92% turnover, less than truckload fleets. The ones where you run local and regional routes are often unionized, are frequently paid hourly, sleep in your own bed, and can clear around $100,000. Those fleets had turnover of about 14%. Same industry, same year, same trucks, same license in your pocket, 92% versus 14%. In fairness, the industry's biggest trade association pushes back hard on this. They argue that turnover measures churn between carriers rather than people leaving trucking. A driver jumping to a competitor for a signing bonus shows up twice in that statistic without anyone actually quitting the profession. They also point out real barriers that have nothing to do with pay. A large share of applicants can't meet federal requirements, and being away from home for weeks pushes people out regardless of the money. Both of those things are true. But that 14% number is very hard to argue with. When the job pays well, runs predictably, and gets you home at night, carriers don't seem to have any trouble keeping drivers at all. All right, so you've been running long haul for 2 years, you're tired of losing hours at docks, and somebody makes you an offer. Stop being an employee. Become an owner-operator. Buy your own truck, keep the whole rate instead of a slice of it, be your own boss. And the best part? You don't need a bank or a credit check or a down payment. The carrier will lease you the truck directly, and at the end of the term, it's yours. This is the second trapdoor, and unlike the first one, this one was designed on purpose. In January of 2025, a federal truck leasing task force, created by Congress, operating under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, delivered its report on exactly these programs. It described them as irredeemable tools of fraud and driver oppression, and recommended banning them outright. That's a federal advisory body. In an official report to Congress, using the word fraud, here's what's underneath that language. These lease purchase agreements fail more than 90% of the time. Through court records alone, the task force identified at least 200,000 affected drivers, about 5% of every driver in the country, and said the real figure is almost certainly much higher because nobody systematically tracks these deals. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Because the carrier controls your dispatch, your truck payment, your maintenance charges, your insurance, and your fuel, and all of it comes out of the same settlement check. Drivers in these programs regularly get negative paychecks. You drive 11 hours a day, 6 days straight, and at the end of the week, you owe the company money. Look at how the structure works, and you'll see why it almost can't fail. For them, you're classified as an independent business owner, so every cost and every risk is yours. But the carrier still decides which loads you get, so you have none of the control a real business owner has. Upset a dispatcher and your loads dry up? Your truck payment doesn't. In September of 2025, a bill landed in the House to ban carrier-managed lease purchase programs outright, endorsed by both the Owner-Operator Association and the Teamsters. Whether it passes is another question. That somebody had to write it tells you plenty. So how did the job that built the American middle class end up here? For that, you have to go back to the 1st of July, 1980. Before that date, Interstate trucking was heavily regulated. The federal government controlled who could haul what, where, and for how much. You couldn't just start a trucking company. Rates were set. And whatever you think of that as policy, the effect was that carriers couldn't compete by undercutting each other on price. So they competed on service, and the union captured a big share of the profits. Around 60% of the industry carried a union card. That is the world where a trucker earned the equivalent of $146,000 a year. Then President Carter signed the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 and dismantled the whole system. Now almost anyone could haul almost anything, anywhere, for whatever price they wanted. And it worked, depending on who you were. Freight rates dropped roughly 25% within 5 years. Shippers saved billions a year. You paid less for everything in every store in America. Economists still cite it as a model of good bipartisan policymaking, and by most conventional measures, they're right. But rates and wages are the same dollar viewed from two ends. When the price of hauling a load collapses, the labor cost has to collapse with it. Thousands of established union carriers went under. Thousands of low-cost non-union operators took their place. Union density fell from around 60% to under 20%. Real weekly earnings in the industry dropped about 30%. And some economists put the long-run fall in long-haul driver pay closer to half. That's the entire story in one sentence. The savings that deregulation handed to shippers and to consumers came in large part straight out of the driver's paycheck. So does this job actually work? The honest answer depends entirely on which version of it you end up in. And the gap is enormous. In the good scenario, you get your CDL, put in your 2 years over the road to build a clean record and clean inspections, and then you get out of long-haul truckload as fast as you can. You land less than truckload or a dedicated regional route, hourly pay, or a strong CPM with real detention and layover money, a union contract if you can get one, home most nights, you're clearing $90,000 to $100,000, you're paid for the hours you actually work, and 20 years later, you're still doing it. That's trucking as a legitimate middle-class career with no degree and no debt. It absolutely still exists. In the bad scenario, you take the free CDL training, which locks you to one carrier before you know what the market pays. You run long-haul truckload, getting paid only for moving miles, quietly donating 8 to 12 hours a week to docks and delays. The money frustrates you, so when somebody offers you the lease purchase, you take it, because it's the only path to ownership anyone has ever put in front of you. 18 months later, you're in the 90%. No truck, no equity, and a debt owed to the company you were driving for. You leave the industry, and your exit gets counted in a turnover statistic that somebody will cite next year as proof of a driver shortage. Same license, same skill, same work ethic. The difference is almost entirely which segment you landed in, and whether anybody explained the difference to you before you signed anything. Here's the thing to keep in mind if you're standing at the start of this. Trucking isn't one job. It's two jobs wearing the same uniform. One of them is the job your grandfather had. Hourly, local, protected, paid properly for his time. The other one pays you only for motion, makes your waiting free, hands you every delay in the supply chain as a personal financial loss, and dangles an ownership deal that fails 9 times out of 10. And nothing about the actual driving changed between them. The trucks got safer, the routing got smarter, the freight kept growing. What changed was a law in 1980, a pay model that stops the clock when the wheels stop, and a lease agreement written so the person signing it almost never wins. The road hasn't changed at all. The paycheck has. And for most drivers, which paycheck they get was decided a long time before they ever climbed into the cab.